when I didn't find out about it until almost over a month ago that this was happening.
In 1966, RCA Records released Charley Pride's debut single to radio stations across America. They sent no photograph, no press kit, no description of what he looked like. This was not an oversight. It was a decision. Because if radio programmers in the South knew that the voice coming through their speakers belonged to a black man from a Mississippi cotton farm, most of them would have pulled the record before a single listener had the chance to hear it. So RCA hid him, and it worked. By the time his third single cracked the country top 10 and stations across America had already put him on air and audiences had already responded, it was too late for anyone to reverse course without publicly admitting why they wanted to. That was the plan Charley Pride was given. What nobody told him, what the plan left out entirely, was what Nashville intended to do with him once the plan had served its purpose. Charley Frank Pride was born on March 18, 1934, the fourth of 11 children in a sharecropping family in Sledge, Mississippi, a place where the cotton fields stretched to the horizon and the Grand Ole Opry came through the radio on Saturday nights because his father tuned it in and nobody in the house changed it. He grew up hearing Hank Williams and Ernest Tubb and Roy Acuff, and he absorbed that music completely without anyone telling him it wasn't supposed to be his. As far as he was concerned, it was his. Baseball was his first way out of the cotton fields. He pitched in the Negro Leagues for the Memphis Red Sox, then followed Jackie Robinson's path toward the major leagues with the kind of focused determination that would later define every other thing he did. He tried out for the California Angels, then the New York Mets. Neither signing ever came through. He ended up in Helena, Montana, working in a zinc smelting plant during the day and singing country music in nightclubs at night, where a local disc jockey heard him and arranged for him to perform for two country stars named Red Sovine and Red Foley. Both of them told him the same thing: go to Nashville. He went. He spent a year getting rejected by every label in the city. Nobody wanted a black man singing country music. Then he walked into a recording session run by a producer named Cowboy Jack Clement, who heard him sing and decided to get him in front of Chet Atkins at RCA. To get his musicians to show up for that first session, Jack Clement told them, "I'm fixin' to cut a record with this na. Are you free?" They showed up. Chet Atkins signed Charley Pride to RCA in 1966 because Atkins trusted his ears more than he trusted the industry's prejudices. But even Atkins understood the reality he was operating inside. Country music's audience was overwhelmingly white. Country radio in the South was controlled by station managers who reflected that audience's worst instincts, and a black face on a record sleeve was the fastest possible way to guarantee a record never got played. So RCA built a promotional strategy around the racism they were navigating rather than pretending it didn't exist. Pride's first single, Snakes Crawl at Night, went out to stations with no photograph, no press kit, and no mention of his race, just a name and a voice. A radio DJ named Charlie Monk, working at a station in Mobile, Alabama, later recalled hearing rumors that a record was coming from what he described as a black guy who sang country music. He remembered there being no photo, no confirmation, nothing to verify it one way or the other, so his station played the song. Because the song was good. That was the entire point. Deny the bigots the chance to say no before the music had been heard. By the time his third single, Just Between You and Me, climbed into the top 10 in 1967, it was too late. Stations across the country had already committed to playing Charley Pride's music. Pulling it would have meant publicly reversing a decision in a way that would require explaining why. And explaining why was something nobody wanted to do out loud. When he finally walked out on stage for live performances, audiences that had been listening to his voice on radio for months without knowing what he looked like, the venues would go completely silent. You could, as he put it, drop a pin. Then they applauded, because the voice was real, and they already knew it. Between 1967 and 1987, Charley Pride became the second best-selling artist in RCA's entire history, behind only Elvis Presley. He had 29 #1 singles. He won 4 Grammy Awards. The Country Music Association named him Entertainer of the Year in 1971 and 1972. He was, by every commercial and critical measure, one of the most successful country artists who ever lived. And while all of that was happening, this is what was also happening. At a party where Pride attempted to keep up drink for drink with George Jones, a man whose drinking was pathological even by Nashville standards, Pride passed out. Jones, drunk, found a can of paint and wrote KKK on the side of Pride's car. Pride wrote about it in his 1994 memoir. He called it a joke, His manager Jack Johnson arranged an early session with Farron Young, co-owner of Music City News, one of the most widely read trade publications in country music, a man whose endorsement could open or close significant doors in Nashville. Young praised Pride's singing and referred to him using a racial slur. Pride did not confront him. He had learned, by that point, the mathematics of the situation he was in. Every confrontation cost more than it recovered. Every public incident of racism that he acknowledged publicly was turned, by the industry's telling, into a story about his hypersensitivity rather than about the behavior that provoked it. So he maneuvered around it, as he put it, and kept working. He won Entertainer of the Year. He kept maneuvering. By the early 1980s, Nashville was in the middle of a generational shift. A new wave of younger, hat-wearing acts were being signed and promoted, while the established names of the previous 2 decades were being quietly managed toward the exit. Dolly Parton went through it. Waylon Jennings went through it. Glenn Campbell went through it. Charley Pride went through it too, with one additional layer that the others did not have. In 1985, Pride was still selling more than 250,000 copies of each new album, a number that would be considered a genuine success in 2026, but was treated by RCA in 1985 as the behavior of a legacy act whose time had passed. His friend Jerry Bradley, a record executive and producer who had worked with him for years, told him the label would never abandon him completely. Pride had his attorney draft a letter to RCA's New York headquarters anyway. He asked for an early release from his contract. They gave it to him. He signed with a smaller label, then another. The gospel album he released in 2006, which featured appearances from Willie Nelson and Dolly Parton and received strong reviews, went largely unnoticed because it was released on a tiny independent label with no promotional infrastructure. The country album that followed it in 2003 met the same fate. Nashville's machine, which had spent 20 years amplifying his voice across the country, was now simply not running. What remained was a man who had broken every barrier put in front of him, sold 70 million records, and was, by 2005, being described in his own industry as a legend, which in Nashville, as he would later note with something just short of bitterness, is a euphemism for has-been. In 2020, the Country Music Association gave Charley Pride the Willie Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award at the CMA Awards ceremony in Nashville. 3 weeks later, Charley Pride died of COVID-19 complications in Dallas, Texas. He was 86 years old. The ceremony where Nashville honored him and the illness that killed him were separated by 21 days. A bronze statue of him now stands outside the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, the building that would not put a black face on a record sleeve in 1966 because they were afraid of what that face would cost them. The real reason Nashville pushed Charley Pride out is not complicated. It is the same reason they used to market him without his face. The industry served his talent when his talent served the industry, and managed him out when the returns diminished. The race never stopped being a factor in either direction, it just changed which direction it was being applied. He said his music was his music, that nobody had ever told him it wasn't supposed to be his. That was the truest thing he ever said, and Nashville spent 50 years trying to figure out what to do with a man that truth belonged to. Subscribe if you want more of the stories Nashville would rather you didn't know about.